Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. We're excited that you're here tonight for another episode of Reawaken Your Brilliance. My thought for today, I had a great conversation with our guest tonight last week about setting the intention. And we talked about setting the intention for the show. So something to think about. Set your intention tonight when you go to bed, whether it's sweet dreams, to solve a problem. When you wake up the next morning, set the intention for a fantastic day. So, on to our guest. Angela Coulter grew up on Long Island and decided early on that she wanted to break the glass ceiling in corporate America. She became the director of global marketing for an international billion-dollar company by the age of 34, only to realize she was miserable. In 2006, she left to start a commercial organic herb nursery. The herb nursery grew steadily until the economy tanked in 2008. Angela decided to provide professional marketing for small businesses. She felt like she hit her groove. Then, in 2009, her world and the perception of it changed drastically. At 40, she hit what she calls her grand awakening and literally woke up one morning with her body vibrating. She suddenly just knew things and started getting messages and communications about events that later happened. She then studied everything she could find on focusing and working with her abilities, including energetic healing modalities, shamanic work, and taking classes on developing the intuition and psychic abilities. In 2011, she started to teach classes and provide intuitive guidance. She finally knows she's discovered what she's come here to do because she loves every minute of it. Welcome, Angela.
Thanks, Julie. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm really excited to be here. This is really cool.
Well, I love all my guests. Obviously, I wouldn't love them if I didn't have them. But why I'm really excited to have you here tonight is all of my previous guests and guests in the future will help people figure out what their body is trying to say or what their intuitive is trying to say, the spirit. And what's great about you is your focus is on helping people get into that and figure out their intuitive and their higher self and everything that they're trying to say. And I think that that's just really wonderful because, you know, as you would agree, we know everything we need to know. It's just sometimes we don't pay attention to it. We don't hear it. And so anyway, so thanks for being with us.
No, well, thank you for inviting me.
Okay, so let's talk. How did you come to reawaken your brilliance? I'm so excited. I want to hear about this literally shaking one morning and waiting up. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, you know, it's funny because I like to put in the early part of my bio about, wanting to break the glass ceiling and be in big corporate America. And I spent all these years doing that and I found out I was miserable. But, it's really funny. People think that of intuition as sort of a right brain thing, like very on the creative and sort of a lot of people call it woo-woo and stuff. But on the softer side, and then you have the left brain stuff that can be very analytical. So the funny thing is though I'm left-handed, I've always, they have those tests for your brain, like whether you're left-brained or right-brained. And whenever I've done those tests, I've always come out almost deadpan in the middle, just over on the right side of the brain. So I've always had a lot of really analytical friends, a lot of really black and white friends, and very technical and, engineering-minded kind of stuff. So I like telling the story about before I got into this because if somebody would have opened a window 10 years ago and showed me what I'm doing today, I would have been like, okay, what drugs are you on? Or what drugs am I on that I'm looking at?
Right.
because there's no way. Like I don't like it wasn't even sort of anything I'd consider doing for a living because it was just not a mainstream kind of thing that you would think of doing as a profession. So it's been quite the journey. And when this happened to me in 2009, it freaked me out. I totally panicked. And, for somebody who, now granted, on the side, I always had, my slow increase of all these little abilities getting uncovered over the years. But it was almost just like fun, just sort of like cool stuff like, oh, this is really cool. I had this dream about this and it happened. Or so-and-so visited me in a dream the other night. And then, wow, it happened like what they told me was going to happen happened 2 days later. But when I woke up that morning and my whole body was vibrating and I heard beings talking to me and I just knew things and it was just the whole universe opened up to me. I panicked and I laid there in bed and I literally thought, am I going schizo? Like, what's the matter? And my husband, who's a very open-minded person, like probably one of the most open-minded people I know, I didn't even want to tell him because, first of all, I didn't even have the words to tell him.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, well, first of all, I got to find out if I'm a freak and I'm crazy or what. So that's how it started. And I laid there and I'm like, well, who do I talk to about this? And a name literally popped into my head, and it was a client of mine at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and a marketing client of mine. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, this is my reputation. This is a client of mine. I had no idea that this person would even know the slightest bit of what I was talking about. And it turned out that it was very serendipitous and very fortunate that she was there because she really helped me through the first steps because I was just totally lost.
That's fantastic. But again, that I think is another kind of the universe giving you listen to it. You listen to your intuition, said, okay, I know I'm kind of scared here. I think I'm going crazy, but I'm going to talk
Yeah.
to this person. And you know what? Let's just see what happens. And lo and behold, that was the right thing for you to do.
Right, right. And it was the first time I actually, I guess, really, really listened on a conscious level because I lay there like in the dark and I heard that voice and I was like, really? Really? And I just heard it again. No, ask her, she'll know. And I was like, all right. And I remember writing the email, like freaking out a little bit, going, okay, what you gonna think? And then it was like, no, no big deal. So it was cool.
Now, your website's named The Road to Awakening. So talk to me. What is The Road to Awakening?
Well, we're all going through this period, and no matter who you talk to, our whole world is changing. Like, and you look in the news, and things change so drastically. Our science is changing. What we know as true is changing. Like what we had versus what we'd accepted before, and all that kind of stuff. And the road to awakening came to me right at the very beginning when I was going through this, because really that's what we're doing. It's almost like we're coming through this period of waking up to who we really are. We're waking up to the divinity within us and to how powerful we are. There's that quote that a lot of people say is, we're not afraid of how powerless we are, but we're
Mm-hmm.
actually afraid of how powerful we actually are. That's sort of like, we're coming back to that power. We're coming back to ourselves. And it's like a really, really cool time. But it's a road and it's an individual path for every single one of us. And it's such a beautiful thing because of that. That there's no one right road and no one wrong road. It's all right as long as it's right for you.
Well, it's too bad I didn't steal your name, because hearing you talk about it, that would have been a great name for the show. And it's very interesting that I have Reawaken and you have Awaken, and
Right.
we're similar but different, and that that there are other things like that. So I think that's really wonderful. Now, before I forget, if you have a question for Angela, do not hesitate to call. You can call 919-576-9549 or 919-851-3858, and you can also Skype call at computers 2K voice. So that's computers the number 2K voice. And then also, if you're on chat, please feel free to email a question and we will go ahead and ask Angela about that. So what should someone expect in terms of an awakening? And you talked a little bit about how you woke up, your body was vibrating and you were hearing things. If there's someone out there that's going through something similar, maybe you could give them some guidance on that.
It's so individual and it's happening differently for everybody, which is cool, and it can be scary at the same time. There are people that I work with that they also do this kind of work and everything now, and they're also going through. We're always going through the awakening. If we're done being here. So,
Mm-hmm.
but but I had one person I know who is pretty far up the road there, and she emailed me I don't know, it was like a couple of weeks ago, and she said, well, how come it can feel so alone? And how come, I feel so lonely even though I have a lot of people around? And that can happen, is it can feel really lonely because it's so individual. But, there's so many different, you look on 5 websites and ask, like you do a search in Google, like
Mm-hmm.
what are the signs of a spiritual awakening, and you'll get totally 5 different answers or 5 different like sets of answers on different sites. But things like your
Vibrating bodies, one,
yeah,
obviously.
vibrating body is a definite. And it was, I think back and now, I'm like, well, that's really cool, but at the time it freaked me out. First, I'm like, okay, am I having a heart attack? Am I having a stroke? No, I'm feeling okay. So let me figure out where this is coming from. And it actually, felt nice once I got used to it, but it was just weird. So vibrating body, the intuitive voice starts coming through a lot more. And not just in your head, but also in signals around you. And you start getting like signs and messages that'll start hitting you upside the head until you listen to them.
Oh,
That's a
mm-hmm.
that's a definite one.
Well, we have a
Um,
question, but I just want to touch on something that you said because I feel so passionately about this. I had once when I was out, I was in Hawaii. This was several years ago, and I was kind of interested in this stuff, but not fully out, not like, hey, I went and saw a psychic or I had my cards read. And I was on the beach in Hawaii, and I literally heard, "Get up." I ignored it. "Get up." Finally, I heard, "Get up now," and it scared me. I was like, "Oh my God!" And I literally got up, and because I was by myself on the beach, and there were people further down, and I turned around and I saw a man staring at me from behind a palm tree. And the next morning, I heard a woman had been raped on that beach, and you will never convince me otherwise that was my higher self saving me. I mean, I truly
Absolutely.
believe that, and so that's why I'm really excited to have you here. But we have a great question. I love this one. I've been through this, number 2502. How do you handle it when your family thinks you're nuts?
Oh, well, I always say crazy is the new normal. That's happening a lot. And because of that, and people being afraid of that, they sort of keep it in the closet for a long time. The key is to really explore what's going on with you and become really comfortable with that. And once you become comfortable with that, then you're very comfortable dealing with other people about it. It took me a long time. Like I said, I was really already comfortable with the topic, yet I wouldn't even talk to my husband about it or anybody for like a couple of months. So, when your family thinks you're nuts, well, they can think whatever they want. I went on this road trip to New Mexico earlier this year and saw this woman called Little Grandmother, and it's all about the spiritual stuff and what's going on with us. And she had talked about this because she sort of came into what she's doing on a world level. And at first she freaked out and she's like, well, she would just be terrified to get out in front of people because she
Mm-hmm.
was just so caught up in what they thought. And she said the man who was her mentor said to her, you know what? It's none of your business what anybody else thinks of you because it's their issue. And that totally struck home for me. And I think that
Mm-hmm.
was, and I know this is probably a question you have for later on, but that was a real turning point for me because that question alone was something that I had been fighting with ever since I started doing this work. Like, the analytical side would start kicking in and being like, oh my God, what are these people going to think of you? They're going to think you're a freak and all that kind of stuff. So when you do finally come to that piece of it's none of your business what other people think of you, it really is their issues and what they think and their perceptions of what they have to adjust to and open their um, perspective, get a more open mind. And I was just talking to a client today about she really is dead on exploring this path and her husband is totally dead off it and in many ways. And I said, well, when you're happy, if he truly believes that it makes you happy and they love, if they truly believe it makes you happy and they love you, they're going to want you to be happy, so they'll accept you as you are.
Absolutely. And I also have another thought for number 2502. Find people who support you and
Yes.
believe in you. You want to surround yourself with people that you can talk to, that you can trust. And I want to tell you there is hope. I was the nutty one in the family. I've always been very different. But I have to tell you, my father has done yoga now, has opened up to some massage and Ayurveda, and I'm like, stole my dad. But
Right,
there
right.
is hope by you setting the example that your
Absolutely.
family can learn to be open to it. They might not, but just know that can happen.
Well, and it's funny is if you just go along your way and you just go along your path and you're happy going along that path, they will start you're like you're saying, Julie, they'll just start picking it up by periphery, or they'll start like sort of, it's sort of like looking at you, long eyeing you from the side. What are you doing over there? And it only takes one thing to work or one thing to to for them to see that happens and for them to say, well, wait, maybe I'll try that. I've had that with several members of my family too.
So it is. There's hope. Keep the faith.
Yes.
So tell me, what are your biggest focus areas that you work on with clients?
I do all different kinds of stuff, but the biggest focus is really getting down to listening to that inner voice because there are a zillion people out there that'll you can go to a psychic and get a reading and whatever, but as we were talking about, we have all the answers, and we'll get to that in a minute, but we have all the answers inside. We are sparks of the divinity and we can tie into that. So why get the answers that you need filtered through somebody else or through another institution or whatever, even me? And that's what I tell people. They come and
Mm-hmm.
I'll say, well, this is what's coming into me, this is what I'm getting. And I try my hardest not to do any filtering whatsoever and just simply give them what I want, because even if it might not make any sense to me, it always makes sense to them.
Absolutely.
So a lot of times what happens is people start coming to me because they want to get past a block they're having in their life. They, even if it's physical, it can be just in their situation
Mm-hmm.
and trying to get further in their career and just whatever. And then the most times we end up working on, because I try to hit right home on, okay, what they'll ask me and I'll say, okay, this is what I'm getting. How does that feel to you? Like, how does your
Mm-hmm.
body react to that? Does that feel right? Because then I try to turn it back to them and have them to start introspecting on if the answer is the right answer for them, because that's really what matters.
Right. But I think you also need to honor what you see as well
Right.
and trust that, maybe if it gets lost in translation somehow, but that to honor what you see, I think that's very important. We have a really good question here from number 3142. And as I've said before, you're not in prison, but I'm going to call you by your number. What do you do when you're scared to listen to the inner voice? It brings up bad memories. How do you handle?
Well, that's typically not the inner voice. What happens when you get those fear voices, the fear, the anxiety, the darkness, or what you consider the darkness, or whatever, is typically an egoic response to something. And this sort of like segues perfectly into talking about the difference between the higher self and the ego, and what that entails. Because the higher self doesn't put forward any emotion. It's our ego that puts forward the emotion. The higher
Mm-hmm.
self will give you the bigger picture. Um, like, Julie, you said get up. You got that message, get up, but it probably wasn't a panic get up. It was just very clear, get up kind of thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So not a, oh my God, get up and run, hurry up. That would be more of an egoic thing. So number one, that's when you have to adjust and sort of tap in and say, okay, is this my ego? Is this my higher self? And why am I afraid to look at this? Because a lot of times you have to go and dig a bit to get to some core beliefs and
Mm-hmm.
anxieties and fears. And and one of the modalities that I learned, we talk about anxieties, fears, regrets, rejections, and resentments. Did I say resentments? But those tend to be the core issues that hold us up, because the things that we're afraid to look at are the things that are, have that negative energy to them. And the more we don't look at them, the more energy we give them, so that makes them bigger.
And it's like a big red flag. It's just going to
Right.
hit you in the face until you deal with it. Now that's it.
Exactly.
And I can't remember if you and I had this conversation last week, because I had it with someone this morning. It's so interesting. We spend all this energy, like you said, oh, I'm afraid, I don't want to deal with it. But what we don't want to what we don't realize is going through the pain is not as bad as we think it is going to be, and there's so much relief on the other end. We think,
Oh
oh my
yeah.
gosh, how did I go on like that? How did I do it? And then once we kind of make it through, then we realize, wow, one, it wasn't that bad, and two, I am in such a better place.
Exactly. And also, there's this perception of, you see in the movies that when somebody has to, say, get hypnotized, or they go into some kind of, state and relive something to get over it or whatever. And I think, Fran Gotcher, who you had on the first show, she had talked about that a bit. People have this perception that they're going to have to like really feel that pain and really, um, drag themselves through it, but there are so many ways of going around it and looking at it. Like I think Fran had said, you do it like you're watching a movie, but you can also set it up so that you don't feel the emotion to go with it. You can just look at it in a very objective light. There are different ways of approaching that, but that's what a lot of people are afraid of is, well, God, I don't want to dig that up because it's going to hurt, like you're saying, or
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to cry, it's going to be terrible or whatever. Sometimes crying is a good release, though.
Yes, absolutely.
Because, before I was doing this work, part of my what I look back on now and realize is that a lot of my armor that I put around me had to do with how empathic I was to people. And so I
Mm-hmm.
learned really early on how to shut it out completely because I didn't like it.
Right.
So a lot of my friends and my family, even my kids, would joke, "Oh my God, she never cries. She never cries, like, no matter what." And I had one friend who kept on asking me things like, "Oh, well, does this movie make you cry? And this
Mm-hmm.
movie?" And I'm like, "No, it didn't." But then, I started doing this work, and once I started opening up and started taking down that armor, I had some great releases, and I hated it at first because I wasn't used to crying. But sometimes they're tears of joy too. And when you release stuff, it's just such a huge, tremendous, uplifting thing,
Mm-hmm.
especially if you've held it down for so long, that it's actually more of a joyful thing than you would ever believe.
Now, can you tell people what ways will our higher self communicate to us?
In every kind of way. And I cover this in one of the classes I teach because right away people think, I'm going to hear a voice, or I'm going to see something, or they have a specific way to expect the answers to come. But it can come in so many different ways. And I do this webcast. I do a webcast twice a week of my own, and I meditate the night before and ask for the topic, and it comes in, and I never have any issues. It happens all the time, and I just trust that it will. So one night I was asking, and I wasn't getting the answer or I didn't think I was getting the answer. But what started happening was I was hearing stuff, or I would see stuff around in my surroundings that were giving me the clues until it almost hit me upside the head after I got like 20 different clues in my immediate surroundings on a piece of paper that had fallen on the floor, and it was just amazing. So when people are getting messages, I always tell them, when you ask a question to your higher self and you are looking for the answer, don't just look for it in one way. Don't think it's just going to come to you in meditation. It could come to you when you're driving down the street.
Mm-hmm.
One of my clients said to me, and this was really great because she had never done any of this work ever. She'd never been to a psychic. She'd never been to even gotten any Reiki or anything. And she'd come in, she was really curious, and she'd signed up for a series of sessions. And after our first session, she came back the second session and she said, I was amazed after all this discussion we had at the messages I realized I was getting. And she goes, but everywhere, she goes, for one day, I was looking everywhere and seeing red. Red, 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 red. She goes, what does that mean? I was like, that's like a red flag right there. Whatever you were thinking, stop right there.
Mm-hmm.
This is what's the right answer. So it's just a matter of readjusting our thinking process to say, okay, well, it could come to me in the form of a conversation. I can't tell you how many times
Mm-hmm.
I've been puzzling over something, and then out of the blue, somebody will walk up to me, or I'll be talking to somebody, and the topic will come up and the answer will be right there, like laid out for me. And I never even asked for it, with that person. So it can come in so many of a variety of ways. And then what's key is to know to test it within yourself and say,
Mm-hmm.
okay, does this feel right? Or does it not feel right? So,
I think that's fantastic. Just to remember, be open to it, and there'll be a variety of ways that your higher self, because trust me, if you don't listen, your higher self is going to try every way in the world to let you
absolutely.
know, until like the red flags that your client saw saying hello, how I had an interesting dream,
Literally, red flag.
literally the other night, and I had to crack up because I know my higher self was like, okay, obviously we can't get through to her. So I had a dream that was very, most of us are visual, and it was just so visual and so apparent, the message. I was like, okay, got it, because it couldn't lay it out any other way without literally smacking me. So I have a
Hmm.
question for you. What is the difference between someone who's psychic and someone who's intuitive?
Well, there really is no difference. It's basically cultural definitions of, it's perception. And I like to start when I do talks. I ask people all the time who considers themselves psychic. And almost always, at the very most, one person might half raise their hand, and everybody else sort of looks at each other like, yeah, okay. Yeah. And then when I ask, well, who's intuitive, then the whole room will pick up, will put their hands up, and that's okay because intuitive is a safer word in our society than psychic. But then I go into explain, well, we all have all these answers. We all have them within us. We're all psychic, so to speak. But it's that perception of this gypsy in a dark alleyway with,
Mm-hmm.
a tarot card deck and a crystal ball. But it's really nothing more than our natural abilities that we all have, every single one of us. And I hear this all the time when people come to me, oh, I don't have one psychic bone in my body. I'm like, oh, yeah, you bet. Just wait till we work together for a little while.
Right, right. And I just think that that's so wonderful that you're encouraging. We have another question, but I just want to let people know again, if you want to call in with a question for Angela, you can call us at 919-576-9549 or 919-851-3858. And I know we have people listening all over the country, and if you want to save a dime, do that because I would. And you can call us at Skype us at Computers 2K Voice just for audio. So if you're in your PJs, you don't have to worry about being seen. Okay, here's a question from Sandy, who gave you a nice compliment, said you were amazing. How do you balance your time so well between your spiritual life and your physical earthly life, making adequate time for both and enjoying both equally? That's a really good question, Angela, because it's great to be all woo-woo and intuitive, but I don't live in that world 24/7. I got to pay the mortgage. So what's your advice on that?
Well, first of all, we have to realize that we do live in that world 24/7. We just compartmentalize and don't think we do,
Mm.
which is part of why a lot of people get the answer smacked upside the head to them, but they don't even realize it because they're not paying attention. They're thinking, okay, that's my meditation time, and this is the rest of my lifetime. and and I have seen, like, my husband, he's an engineer, and he's awesome at this stuff, but then he starts letting his left brain get in the way, and he starts, thinking about all this stuff. I'm like, you can fix that. You can just change it. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that's right. Because we compartmentalize our spirituality with the rest of our life. So that's part of the answer, because it took me a long time to realize that, because I was trying to compartmentalize one part of my life and the other, and then what happened was it got so bad and it started conflicting and causing so much friction, because I would try to compartmentalize it that it totally
Mm-hmm.
crashed everything. So what's really important is to realize that, okay, yes, there is time to really be woo woo, but at the same time, you know, that saying that we're not human beings having a spiritual
Mm-hmm.
experience, but we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And that's something we're trying to remember too. That's all part of the awakening process, going, well, this is all spiritual. And it's, yeah, all right, so we don't walk around with some, well, most of us don't walk around with our tarot cards or whatever, or our I Ching, whatever, in our day-to-day life. But if we retrained ourselves to listen to our inner self throughout our entire life, think of how much easier going through life would be.
Wouldn't it? That's really true. So, I have a question. What do you recommend how people can clear the mind to quiet the chatter? Because, you've talked about the difference between the ego and the higher self. And, I know sometimes my ego just drives me crazy, like da 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 da. So,
Oh
how do
yeah.
we quiet that?
Well, first of all, let me back up a little bit and talk about a great analogy that I give, because people still have this gray area about what's the ego and what's the higher self. So my understanding is that the ego is more of a um, it makes its decisions. It's a level of consciousness created simply by our 3D Earth experience. So if we have gotten hurt doing one thing, it assumes that every time we do that thing, we're going to get hurt. Or if somebody else we saw get hurt, or da 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 da, or had problems, then we assume that that's going to always happen. And the way it was shown to me just recently is it's sort of like playing a board game. And
Hmm.
your ego is like the little pawn on the board game, and it can see the space in front of it, the space behind it, the spaces around it, the other players that are nearby it. And it can make its decisions only based on that, but it can't see the whole game, and it can't see where it's going. Where your higher self is more like the player sitting at the board, or even the creator of the game, and looking down going, okay, well, this is where we're going, and I can see that path. And even though that pawn might think that that's a dead end, It really is a
Mm-hmm.
shorter path, and it's with much more grace and ease. So that gives a clear separation of how, like, when you get all this chatter in your head, you have the ego going, well, if we make a turn here, then we might hit a dead end, but I can't see that. So, but this is what we're going to just say. We're going to think that's going to happen, and blah, blah, blah. And then we're going to create all this anxiety around it. And the higher self is like, okay, just chill, because we can see that whole thing. So the first thing I always tell people is meditation is key. But what people always think when you hear the word meditation is more of a, everybody thinks of that person sitting up on a mountain in lotus position and chanting Om. But it really is anything that you can do to clear your mind and get rid of the chatter. So it can be working out. Some people just like to have a good run outside or on a treadmill or whatever. Or you can go hiking or do yoga. You can do standard meditation. You can do a combination of anything like that. Some people paint or do art. Whatever it is that quiets the mind so that you have that space and that you can expand that presence and your consciousness, that's the first step.
Mowing the lawn does that for me, as well as taking bubble baths. It just,
Cool.
for whatever,
Yeah.
being in the water, it gets me into that state.
Yeah. Oh yeah, bubble baths are cool.
And I
Knowing that one too, I could see that. Yeah.
and I appreciate you saying whatever the meditative state is, because I think you're right that a lot of people think, I've got to look like this or I can never achieve it. And saying, hey, you know, it's whatever's going to get you in the groove to do that. I think that that's very important. Again, what I love about the road to awakening is there are many paths to this, and people will find what's right for them instead of being like, this is the only way, my way or the highway. So that's really fantastic.
Right, and you know what, that's really, really important, because I get that question all the time. Am I doing this right? Am I doing this right? And then I always ask, are you? What do you think? Because and also then I get these questions, well, should I learn this or should I learn this first, or what should I do first? And I always say, you know, there's no right way and there's no wrong way. And that's what's really, really cool about the road to awakening. It's that whole you know, we have, what's that quote there, everybody has their own paths up the mountain, but at the top we see the same bright moon. We all have our own path, and what's right for me might not be right for you.
When I was in college, they used to call me, indecisive one. And what I figured out was I was afraid of making the wrong answer. So instead of making a choice, I would opt out. Well, technically that was a choice, opting out. And so I realized that was a fear, but I don't think I'm alone in that, fearing, I'm going to make the wrong decision. And what happens if I do?
No, because it's all, you know what? My understanding is we're here to experience. So it's all about the experience. So we make a decision and we experience what is related to that decision. There's no right and wrong answer. And like I said, you know, I look at it as different flavors of ice cream. You know, ice cream is 99% of the same ingredients, and then that 1% difference is the difference between whether I like mint chocolate chip or you like butter pecan. But does it make me right because I like mint chocolate chip and you like and you wrong because you like butter pecan? No, it's just because one's right for me and one's right for you.
So how do we discern the answers to the questions we ask?
So first of all, if you get an answer that's really panicky or has any kind of like strong emotion attached to it or judgment, that's typically from the ego. And there are ways, and there's some really fun ways that you can do a really easy ways to tap into that higher self and sort of get that quiet and just ask some yes or no questions. I actually wanted to do one of those with us tonight. So.
Oh, well, fantastic.
Yeah.
Do you want to go ahead and do that now?
Yeah, sure.
And if you're driving, please do not do this. Or, well, is it safe to drive? I don't want anyone,
no,
you know.
I
didn't think so. Okay, so if you're, you know, we have all the episodes that are kept up here, so you can go back and do the exercise if you're not able to now. But let's. I'm excited. Lead us in an exercise.
Okay, so this one is really fun, and it's something I learned in an intuitive class that I had taken early on or whatever, and it was actually a version of something else. I have a gnat flying around me, excuse me. But it's a version of something else that I had learned earlier on as well. But so let's everybody just close their eyes and take some deep breaths. Everybody do it. Don't cheat. Don't just watch. So first of all, everybody's got yes or no questions in their life that they don't have the answer to right off the bat. And so I'm going to say first, as we're clearing our minds, to think of a question that we have in our lives that could take a yes or no answer. but you don't necessarily know the answer to, or you're unsure, or you're still waiting to get the answer or whatever. So think about that for a couple seconds. And then when you have that question, just close your eyes and center yourself. Take a couple of deep breaths. And as you're breathing, see if you can listen to your heart or feel your heartbeat. Now, imagine a table is in front of you. Keep your eyes closed. And on that table, I want you to imagine two different coats. And make the coats up. They don't use coats you already have. Just make two different coats up. And see them sitting on the table in front of you. Now look at one of the coats and infuse that coat with all the energy of yes. Feel all the energy of yes going into that coat, every thread, every fiber. And now look at the other coat and do the same thing with that for the energy of no. Infuse it with no all throughout the coat. Now, in looking at both coats, I want you to ask yourself this question, your yes or no question, and put on that yes coat. Try it on. See if it fits. See if it's too tight. Is it too big? Does it feel scratchy, or does it feel really comfortable? And when you're done with that, take that coat off and put the no coat on and do the same thing. Is it too big? Is it too small? Is it scratchy, or is it just right? And then you can take it off. And if you didn't get a clear answer, you can try them on again. And then come back to where we are and open your eyes.
Well, I'm ready to go buy a purple jacket. So I think that's a wonderful exercise and easy to do, and something that someone could practice daily to start using their intuitive muscle. Would anyone like to chat in or call in and tell about what your yes or no question was? You can call us at 919-576-9549 or 919-851-3858, or you can Skype with Computers 2K Voice.
What's really cool about this exercise is listening to the responses of people who've never done it before. Because there's so many times, there's so many times you can hear when the ego is trying to cut in and take over. Because they'll say, well, it was really funny because Julie, you were at this presentation I did last week where somebody was like, well, I used my favorite jacket as one of the answers because but that's the answer you wanted to have. So there you're trying to predispose yourself, and there's the ego going, yeah, that's the answer we want to have.
Well, what was really interesting when I did the exercise with you last week, I didn't have any outcome, and both jackets were pretty. I mean, I love purple, I love dark brown. I've done my colors. I know they both look good on me. And surprisingly, I mean, it was a very clear yes to my question. It was very, and I didn't know which one it would be. So I just love that exercise. I think it's
great. My kids, who are both teenagers, they love doing that. They're like, wow, that's so cool. How does that work?
All right, if it's past teenager approval, then we know that it's good to go.
Right.
If they're willing to do it.
That's right. And what's really funny is then I've had people do it, and then they say, well, yeah, I got the answer that I didn't think I would get. But that can't be the right answer, because then you start hearing them try to overthink it. And see, that's where we get into that hang up is
Mm-hmm.
our heart tells us, and it depending on how you want to look at it. Either it's your soul, your heart, your higher self, it's all the same thing because it all comes through from the heart. If if your heart if you're your heart's going to come through with the true answer. And it's typically the first answer you get without any, emotional response. But the ego can many times just, we were in this habit of having it override our heart.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't even know we've gotten into such a habit, excuse me, that to listening to that ego and to listening to all that chatter that we just have forgotten how to listen to the heart to begin with.
So I'm curious, how does connecting to your higher self relate to blockages and physical ailments that people might have?
Well, it's basically not listening. And it's amazing how absolutely literal the spiritual, emotional, mental can totally manifest itself into the physical. I had a former marketing client call me, and she was just wanting to get together because we hadn't caught up for a while. It had probably been like 6 or 8 months since we'd spoken, and so we got together, and I was really surprised when I went to see her and saw that she was using a cane. She's not an old woman. I mean, she's, middle-aged or whatever, but
Mm-hmm.
she's very healthy and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, well, what happened? She said, well, I tore my ACL in my knee, and, they thought it was something little, but it's not healing. So I said, oh. And then we started talking, and she started asking me about Reiki and energy modalities and all that kind of stuff. And I said, well, here, let me do some Reiki for you. And I was giving her Reiki on her knee and doing some theta healing at the same time. And right away, as soon as my hands went onto her knees, I heard she's tripping herself up over
Mm.
something in the past. And I mean, literally, what your knees, your ankles, your legs,
Mm-hmm.
your hips all have to do with moving forward and, projecting ourselves forward. So if you keep on having the same thing, there's something that's tripping you up. And so I just said that to her. I said, well, I'm getting at something. There's something from your past that's tripping you up and preventing you from moving forward. And, in truth, her business had gone nowhere. It hadn't, it had gotten to a certain point when we'd been working together. And over that period of time, I hadn't seen her. It had been dead in the water. And I'm like, I had no idea what happened. And so we were having this conversation. And then she said, and she was quiet. And then first she said, wow, all of a sudden, like all the muscles in my leg around my knee just completely relaxed because oh my God, it feels so good. She's like, wow, that's amazing. And then she's quiet. And then, like 10 minutes later, she said to me, you know what? My ex-husband has been back in my life lately, and he
Mm.
has been making it really difficult with me, with my children. And I can't seem to get past it. And it was like so perfectly packaged in terms of what her physical ailment was, doing for her and telling her. So many times, if we're not listening to our higher selves, we're not allowing things to flow through. We're not clearing out these hangups or these negative emotions that we
Mm-hmm.
have. We will actually manifest it into a physical sense.
So talk a little bit more about that, about manifestation and the creation of our reality. Tell us about that. Is there research? Is anyone just get into that a little more?
Yeah, actually, what's amazing, and the whole field of quantum physics today is amazing, and what they're discovering in terms of our intention and how we are controlling, how we're able to control the molecules and atoms around us. There's a book called The Intention Experiment by Lynn McTaggart that is an awesome, awesome read. And if you don't like reading it and you like seeing, examples of it, there are plenty of people who go around and do lectures on it. But also you can find like little video clips on YouTube and stuff online. But they did these experiments, and the main one they talk about a lot is how they set up this lab, and they were sending waves of light through these walls with little holes in them, and they expected them to act the way that our science tells them they're going to act, like a regular, like a line in a linear fashion and a light ray. And so they did this experiment, and they saw it happen, and then they walked away and they let the thing continue running, and they discovered that when they weren't actually watching the molecules, that they acted completely differently. So they had all of this research, this information that has shown, it's amazing, that has shown that when we watch something and we expect it to happen, that it actually, the atoms and the molecules many times just follow suit and do exactly what we expect them to do. So that's just amazing in terms of, it shows how healing, energetic healing works, and how our manifestation of our reality works. It's really cool stuff.
Well, and so that was, again, you said Lynn McTaggart?
Lynn McTaggart is the author, and the book is called The Intention Experiment.
And if someone wanted to check out some videos on YouTube, what would they look under?
I would just go to Google and type in The Intention Experiment and like go
Okay.
like Google videos or whatever. I'm sure there's like tons of them out there. I've seen them.
Can you give me a couple examples of how working with people that you've been able to change their lives and help improve them?
There are so many, because I feel like, you know what? It's so funny. I'm so passionate about doing this because it's like I feel like a little kid
Mm-hmm.
exploring a new world every day. So to me, it's like when I'm sitting there working with somebody and I see something that I had no idea about, it could be a complete stranger, it could even be a friend, but things I had no idea about, and then it comes up and they're like, "Oh wow, God, how'd you know about that?" You know, that to me is just absolutely phenomenal. But it changes people's lives because it starts realizing, because I my goal is to empower people, to have
Mm-hmm.
people remember their own power. So my goal is to allow them to realize, and changing their life being that they can take control of the reins and create the life that they want, that's going to make their heart sing. So, you know, and that happens in so many different ways, whether it's just in self-confidence and knowing their direction,
Mm-hmm.
but even things like the physical. One of my clients that I have been talking to today, sh this is really phenomenal. This is a really phenomenal story, and she has had all these weird medical things all her life. Weird food allergies, weird reactions to things, and they've never been able to pinpoint what the cause of all of these are, and nothing seemed to connect. All different kinds of little minor ailments, nothing major, but all these little minor things just to make her uncomfortable in the way she was living. So, we had gone through several sessions and I was pulling my hair out because I'm going, why? We were doing a healing, and we would do healings on it, and it would be fine for like a couple of days or a week, and then it would come back on certain things. And I was like, well, obviously we're missing the core, the underlying issue.
Mm-hmm.
And something came up, and this is really going to sound woo woo, but
That's all
I'll
right.
tell you, there's plenty of that goes around these days. But all of a sudden, it just bam hit me in the head one day when we were in the middle of a session, that her soul is really feeling confined and uncomfortable and has never fully assimilated with her body. So we did this whole thing on assimilating her soul and her body, and then she went on vacation for a couple weeks. We didn't talk for probably like 3 weeks, and then we were talking, and she was like, "Oh my God, I feel so much better now." Granted, there are still a couple of little things, but she's like, "I feel so good. I feel so happy with my body." And you know what? I was on vacation and I ate foods that I've had allergies to for years, and I had no problems.
Wow.
So that was just amazing. That, and yeah, we have other things that we're working on that are little. But I'm like, you know what? Now I know that we're going to be able to fix the rest of that, because, or not fix, just change the rest of that, because now, her body and her soul are much more assimilated. So I know that sounds really woo woo, but I mean, it happened. And so it's just amazing.
So then, do you feel, I know I would talk about myself. I feel we have layers, and that even if we get the core, as we do, like I'm doing some body work now, and I'm really like, good Lord, how much left to go? But I'm amazed at how deeper I go
Right.
each time. What are your thoughts on layers?
Absolutely. When I first started doing this work, I used to call it, layers of the onion, but it's really, a friend of mine said, "Oh God, I hate that analogy because onions are stinky." And I'm like, okay, how about layers to the rose, or layers to the flower, petals to the
Mm-hmm.
flower? Yeah, we have all of these layers, and you know what? I'm doing work to myself all the time, continuously, no matter how far. I know people who've been doing this kind of work for 20, 30 years, and they're still doing work on themselves. It's all because, and the deeper you get, I mean, you just keep on getting deeper and deeper, and
Mm-hmm.
you get to the more core issues. And the analogy that I use a lot in talking about that is, at first, it might seem overwhelming because you have all these little things that you're clearing up. But it's sort of like when you have a counter that's full of junk, right? So if something spills on the counter or something, dumps over on the counter, it's like, okay, I'll get to it later because you just don't want to look at it because there's all this mess, right? So when you do all this clearing, you start working on the clearing, you pick up one thing, you clear it off, you move it away, and you get rid of it, you release it, and you start clearing all that stuff. Well, then the counter gets relatively clear. Well, then what happens if something dumps over on that counter? You want to clean it up right away because it comes really like it like what do they call it? Zoom and pan or something like that. Like they zoom in on like, oh my God, I have to get rid of that right now because now it's going to bug me because it's so apparent that's standing out to me. So the difference is the more that you do the clearing, and the deeper you can go. And then what happens is when things pop up, they become so clear on what you need to release that it becomes like an automatic thing.
I like that analogy. I'm going to use that. And I also like the rose petal instead of the onion. So I'm going to talk about my rose petals.
Metaphor.
Yes, much better. So, Angela, there are a lot of people that do what you do, and they're different types of practices, similar, maybe very different. What advice do you have to people when choosing a particular, not a path, but modality in a practitioner? What would you say to them?
Well, I would say that if you're going to go see somebody or, have a session or whether you're going to see them or you're going to learn it from them, that you should just try it out, try different people out and see how it feels to you. If you're not comfortable with it, then it's not right for you. Then you can just go to somebody else. It doesn't mean that they're bad. It just means that it's just not right for you. It goes back to that different flavors of ice cream. This one might be, Rocky Road and you don't like it Rocky Road, but that's okay because there's another one down over there that's just plain vanilla and that's okay too.
And what would you say to skeptics out there? And again, my intention is to not beat anyone over the head, although I have felt like that at times with certain people. But perhaps maybe what would you say to them just to maybe give it a try or open up? What are your thoughts?
Say, you know what? I would say give it a try. Give one thing a try. Look at, some of the biggest skeptics I know have to sit back and think about it when they start looking at like that intention experiment stuff that I talked about, because now we're starting to overlap science and woo-woo, right? So when you can start saying, well, God, they did research on this and wow, that sort of makes a lot of connections. That's one thing to look into for skeptics, but also, listen and try it yourself and see and see, don't disprove it. Be a kid and play with something new because, you might find out you like it.
Well, I have two nieces and a nephew, and, they're at that age where, they don't like a lot of stuff. And so I say, hey, have an adventure bite. So when you're 20, you can't say, Auntie Jugie, I love asparagus, and why didn't you tell me that? So I always encourage them, have an adventure bite, and then we'll try it because you never know, you might like it. Tell me about the Great White Tree.
Oh, yeah, the Great White Tree is another site that I'm working on that I was sort of gifted with this vision of, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago, but the time's coming for it. I'm getting to it. But it's a different website than my Road to Awakening site. And it's basically the effort for that is taking all the walls down between us, and making the effort of educating everybody that, you know what, just because your belief system is different from mine doesn't mean that we're different. It means that we're just have an individual path, and there's no reason for us to think that somebody's right and somebody's wrong. So a lot of judgments come from not being educated or just not knowing. You grow up in a household and you go to church and you learn what your church tells you, and you never learn say what the Muslim temple teaches you, or this other, New Age spirituality, or, the Buddhists. I mean, there's so many different belief systems, and really at the end of the day, when you take out semantics, like 95% of the meaning behind it is the same. But we've gotten into all of these egoic things on, well, I'm right and you're wrong, and because this is right and this is, and and that's what they told me. And so the effort is, let's get rid of all that, because we're all one. We're all part of the same family, and we're all part of the same planet, the same organism. And it's funny, somebody said to me about, well, that'll never work because nobody will want to give away their individuality. And I said, well, here's the thing, and it sort of sounds like it's counterintuitive, but if we actually remember our oneness and remember that we are all part of the divine, that actually we can become the best individual that we can be by tapping into that.
I agree with that 100%. I feel as I heal, you are healed. And if we start doing that, it's just going to raise everyone up. So my next question is, I'm just having a moment. It's one of those senior moments. Someone out there might be struggling, like I'm in a bad relationship. I hate my job. What would you say to them?
I would say that why don't you take a look at what the cause of it is and try to work through it, because if we avoid something, if it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, if we avoid something because we're afraid of it or because we don't like it or it gives us pain or whatever, or the perception is that it gives us pain, then we give more energy to it and we make it bigger. If we become more fluid and we look at it and we look at the cause of it and we can release it, because we can release it, and we can find what's causing it to happen in our immediate surroundings and why we're manifesting that, and it's part of our experience and it's learning and putting that puzzle together, then we can release it, and then wow, once you become fluid like that, the universe just opens up to you.
I think fantastic. But my other question, that kind of, you touched on this a bit, I'm all about taking action. I want people to watch these shows, and I'm hoping that they'll be like, that's what I want to do or get interested in. What one thing can someone do right now, tomorrow morning, to reawaken their brilliance?
Start working on listening to that inner voice, because you know what? It's time for us to take our power back. And so that's all about reawakening your brilliance, because we have become, part of this experience was to disempower ourselves and pretend that other people could have, and other institutions and all different kinds of groups could have power over us and tell us what we can do and what we can't do, and what's right for us and what's wrong for us. But now we're done with that experience. We're coming back around. That's part of the awakening process, and we're coming back to our own power. And so the first step to that is being able to listen to our higher voice and listening to the divinity within us.
I really like that. So, Angela, if people want to learn more about you, well, first, do you have any upcoming events or classes that you'd like to tell people about?
I do. Actually, I have a tapping into your higher self, part 1 is coming out next Wednesday night, 6:30 to 9. All of this stuff is on my website, which is roadtoawakening.net. But I have one class that's tapping into your higher self, part 1, and that's in person here in Apex, North Carolina. And the second one, and so that's next Wednesday, this is the 7th. The following Wednesday, which is September 14th, is part 2, which is learning how to connect and communicate with ascended masters, archangels, angels, spirits of light, and all that kind of stuff. And then I have an online class September 20th and 27th, which is, the name of it is, Basic Ways to Clear Self-Limiting Beliefs, Thoughts, Words, and Deeds, which is helping people learn how to go through some of these exercises of clearing things themselves. Because again, I'm trying to empower people to be able to do it themselves. So all of that's on my website at roadtoawakening.net. And then I also have my twice a week webcast that I do, and I put it up. And I now have a URL. You can just type in A Cup of C. It's called A Cup of C, ACUPPAC.net. Or you can go through my website at roadtoawakening.net too, because I post that up every Monday and Thursday.
All right. Well, that's wonderful. And I want to let everyone know, Reawaken Your Brilliance has a website. We've got the bones up, but if you would like to email me anything, you can send that to Julie at reawakenyourbrilliance.com. If there's someone you'd like to see or a subject that you want covered, please shoot me an email. We have lots of wonderful guests coming up, but this is your show. I want you to be able to ask the questions and have the guests that you want to learn more about. And please also look at us on Facebook under Reawaken Your Brilliance. We'd love it if you'd like us. And you can also follow us on Twitter at Reawake, Berlin. I'm not famous, so I couldn't get the full Twitter out there. And we had a great last question. I'm sorry that it's a little too much. We can't get to that, but I will forward that question to Angela. Or you want to stay? We can go past Angela. We can go a few more minutes. We have a question.
I have a couple more minutes. Yeah.
Okay, we'll do this last question, and then I'll wrap up. But just, you know what? I want to give a shout out to Amnon tonight, who is he doesn't like the attention, but he is not only our wonderful technical director, not only allowing me to do this show, but if I have a computer question, he is phenomenal. My battery died this week, and I came here in a panic. and he fixed it. And if you have any computer questions on this Bat channel from 9 to 12 on Sundays, you can check him out. And I would encourage you to do that because he is a wealth of information. So now that I've embarrassed him and he's not saying anything, we will go to our question from Sandy. Can you bring clarity to this thought? We, according to the law of attraction, are advised to do what makes us feel good so we can manifest more good stuff. My computer. Okay, sorry, my computer died. But if we have negative stuff coming up that we are trying to clear, in those moments, aren't we attracting more? In other words, if we are in a negative funk, aren't we attracting more negative funks? Oh, good question.
Well, actually, if you're clearing it, if you're working on clearing it, you're getting rid of it. You're releasing it. So it's dissolving the power of that negativity.
And I, if I'd like to add something, because I've been doing some body work, what Dr. Trell, who was our guest last week, said to me, it's more about riding the wave as well. Instead of worrying or panic, oh, that's my, you would probably say ego, and correct me if I'm wrong, oh, that's my ego worrying, hey, ego, what's up, worry, hey, how you doing? Instead of getting caught up in having a negative thing and spiraling out of control, it's being able to ride that wave.
Right. And, so there are so many different exercises that we learn as we're clearing. And, you can say, there are ways that you can say to the ego, okay, thank you for your input. You are loved and appreciated and a fully integrated part of my, 12 levels of consciousness. So let me pay attention to the bigger picture right now. I mean, there are ways of doing that and just putting sort of the ego aside so that you can sort of clear out all that freaking out that's going on.
Oh, I agree with that. I think that's just amazing. And Angela, thank you so much for being a guest tonight. If you want to find out more information about Angela, please check out her website at roadtoawakening.net. And
yeah, Julie, just quick, I see on
sure.
the thing you put roadtoawakening.net, there's a typo on the website.
Oh, that's Amnon's fault. I'm going to call him out on that. So we will have that. But just so you know, all past episodes are kept here. And again, with the website coming, we will have links to everything and you will have everyone's information on. We hope to have you all here next week. Our guest is going to be Jennifer Shelton, who's going to be talking to us about astrology and how that can be a definitive tool to help you out. So in honor of Amnon tonight, I'm going to not sign off as namaste, but shalom, y'all.
Thanks, Julie.
Thanks, Angela.